What is up, everybody? On this mileage unknown, I am going to be doing a little work to Ep76. A little while ago, I had gone to go for a ride in the car and, man, fired it up. It was running cold like a cold Volkswagen, sounded like a cold Volkswagen, backed it out of the garage, and out of nowhere could just smell gas. Gas like you can't believe. Shut the car off. There's a puddle of gas where the car was sitting when I had tried to crank it over and get it fired up. There's a trail of gas leading out of the driveway, down the driveway from backing it up. And of course I open up the deck lid, pull off. I didn't even have to pull off any of the air cleaners yet. I could see the passenger side carburetor just pouring gas out of it, pouring gas everywhere. And even when I got the valve cover or the air cleaner off, it was just dumping gas down the barrels. So I definitely have a needle seat issue possibly, or a float issue, something going on with the passenger side of carburetor. And it's been a while since I've worked on any of the cars. Honestly, we went from it was hot to you didn't want to work on cars because it was hot. Trav was under the weather. I've been under the weather. Holidays happen, and you just get sidetracked. And so, unfortunately, Pop's car sat here, and it's bummed me out because we haven't worked on it. And I want to get it going. I want to get one of the Volkswagens going. I tell you what, but man, I've been sick of playing with carburetors. I'm sick of carburetors. So I'll flip it around. We might just try and take the top off the carburetor with it in the car and see what we can see before we delve in deeper and actually pull the carburetor all the way off. But what we're going to do is pull off the velocity stacks, the filter base, and work on just pulling the top of the carburetor itself off, seeing what we can see. I actually did shoot a video a while back when this all initially happened, so you can see some of the aftermath of the gas. Fired up Pop's bug for the first time in a while. That's fun. If you guys remember, these were the very cheap carburetors that I bought from CIP1, and I did kind of what I'm sure everybody does, but what you shouldn't do. We bolted them on. We didn't open them up and clean them out like you should, so that could be part of the issue. Something clogging the needle seat just from us not cleaning them before we put them on the car. But man, we put them on the car and it just ripped. It ran better than it has in forever. I mean, the car just ripped. So we kind of thought we got away with just bolting them straight to the car, and maybe not. So we're going to pull the top off this one and see how it goes. Here's another issue that I didn't actually notice before, but it is crazy how much that throttle arm is actually loose now. So I guess the more surprising part is that nut was able to back off even with that little, there's like a little lock washer or a lock flap. The washer folds over the nut, and it looks like that had actually bent itself out enough to loosen that up. So that's something else I'm going to have to address. Now you don't want to over tighten that shaft, because it can put too much pressure on the throttle shafts itself, which can cause a whole nother set of issues for you. So you got to be careful there as well. seen, carburetor floats, and the needle and seat, how that works is gas comes in through the inlet, fills up the bowl in the carburetor, and as it fills up, this float rises, and that needle seat shuts off the flow going into the carburetor. Hear it as I actually blow. I don't know how well you could hear that or how well you could see that. So that's what actually shuts the flow off of fuel going into the carburetor. Now the issue I had, or thought I was having, was that needle was stuck. But as you can see, it's moving very smoothly with no issues, right? That's not the problem. But something was causing the fuel not to shut the flow off, overflowing the carburetor, which that's a very easy way to have a very, very bad day on one of these cars. A spark could have set this car on fire really easy with as much fuel as was everywhere. If you look close at that float right there, it has a big old crack in it. So what's happening now is that fuel bowl in the carburetor is filling up with fuel, except for now, once it hits that mark, hits that float, that crack in the float, now the float fuel fills up with fuel. So when this float isn't enough to actually keep it up, so it's forcing down. It thinks the fuel bowl is empty and just keeps pumping more and more fuel into the carburetor. So it's actually going to be a fairly easy fix. I need to replace this float. Once I replace the float, we shouldn't have any issues. Now, I'm very surprised that a brand new carburetor, and at the time that this happened, let's say it was 4 months old, that I have a crack in the float like that. It's possible that that was that way before, it just worsened over time to where it was actually allowing fuel inside that float and sinking it. Would we have caught it had we taken the carburetor apart? I don't know. Is the float just that super cheap on this one that something caused it to crack and sink? Not sure. But clearly I've got to get another float. Unfortunately, I do have some carburetors that these are modeled after, but they're up at Travis's place. So I'm going to have to maybe venture up there tomorrow, see if I could steal one of the floats out of that if it's the same, and maybe that'll solve the problem and Pops 56 will be back on the road. And got a couple of floats out of some carburetors I had sitting there. Now the interesting thing about both of these is they also appear cracked. This one, not as bad as this one. Now, the original one was cracked much lower. It was cracked lower on the float. Now, I don't know why, but maybe because the two I pulled out of the carburetors appeared cracked as well, I decided to pull into this one a little bit more. Now, I honestly thought these floats were hollow. That's how light they actually are. And I felt like I could actually suck air out of that crack or through that crack. So unless, because this foam in here, unless it's porous enough to hold gasoline and sink the float, I'm not 100% sure that this was the cause anymore, because the other two floats seemed cracked similarly. Not as low, but similarly. So for now, I'm actually going to put the one that looks the best, and the crack is much higher, so maybe maybe we'll escape the fact that it could fill up with gas as well. I really did think these were hollow. Now I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be what's causing our issue, but I'm going to order some new floats. I'm going to throw this one in that looks the least bad and see what actually happens. So it is just a simple bar that slides through part of the case. The needle itself hooks onto the float, that little flap there. Hopefully you can see that. And that just goes up and down like I demonstrated earlier. Well, let's see what happens here. I don't want to crank it forever. It sounds like the battery's not super awesome. Man, that linkage is squeaky. Thought we had it there. I'm just checking to make sure the carbs aren't dumping stuff everywhere. Whoa. Just about got attacked by a bird. She's running, but she ain't running good. And I don't really recommend doing this, but just for example, I still have nothing going on any of the adjustment screws over here on the driver's side carburetor. Now, I have them disconnected, and you can hear the passenger side carburetor. Operating just the passenger side carburetor. Now the driver's side is doing absolutely nothing at all. I don't recommend doing that. I didn't run the car very long, but it did help me kind of isolate what's going on. Clearly, the passenger side carburetor, the one that was dumping fuel at one point because of the possible issue with the float, now seems to be functioning halfway normal. When I touch any of the adjustment screws, it does affect the way the car runs. Now, the driver's side carburetor. any of the adjustment screws on that carburetor had no effect on how the engine ran. Now, I also know that it was getting spark to those cylinders. I pulled the wires, heard them the spark jumping away. If you pulled the wires to the passenger side, car immediately died. So the only thing keeping the engine running is the 2 cylinders on the passenger side. So I've got to pull the carburetors apart, clean them, rebuild them. Man, I'm so sick of carburetors. Of course I thought I was done, and then decided to keep on tinkering, which I ripped that gasket in half. So I pulled the top off the driver's side carburetor. I don't know if you could see, there was actually a little bit of gas dripping out, but no gas at all, not even a little bit in the carburetor bowl. So now I'm curious. Ooh, see this? The needle is not moving at all on this carburetor. So my new thought on what has actually happened, this is the needle seat that was stuck. This needle seat stuck, causing all the pressure to go to this carburetor, which then in turn, fuel everywhere. So I was right about a needle seat being stuck. I was wrong about which carburetor though. I wonder if I have another gasket at Trav's. I was actually starting to question whether I think there's a little filter in this part here. And I was questioning whether that was the issue. You can see the needle right there. And it just moves ever so slightly on that end. And it was definitely stuck closed because I couldn't blow through it. But now, I can. So we're losing daylight. Everything's super loose. All the adjustments are crazy out of whack now. But I'm gonna try and fire it up, see if we get some fuel going to that carburetor and see if the car at least runs a little bit better, which would give me a chance to actually tune this thing when I have a bit more light. Well, it's amazing what a difference 2 functioning carburetors make, and 4 cylinders versus 2 cylinders. So this is actually the best the car's ran in a little bit. Clearly, I need to spend some time actually syncing the linkage, syncing the carburetors, and doing those final adjustments to make it run good again. I'm curious, what are you guys running in your old Volkswagens or your cars that sit for a little bit as a fuel stabilizer? Are you running stable here and there? I mean, I want to drive the car quite a bit. I've always kind of ran some Marvel mystery oil through the oil and a little cap full here and there through the tank. I don't know that that helps that much with keeping everything stable as it goes through the carburetor or if it sits for a little bit, but it's something I've always kind of done on these old Volkswagens, my old cars in general. So I'd love to hear what you guys are using to keep your fuel stable if your car sits for a little bit, because man, it's amazing how you can go down the wrong road. The issue I originally had was gas just pouring out of the passenger side carburetor. And so I focused there, focused everything on the passenger side carburetor, pulled it apart, found a crack in the float that I thought was hollow, but is some weird composite foam shenanigans. But I kept thinking that was the issue until I started playing and running and getting a little deeper, and clearly found it was this side that affected that side. Which is also why when you're syncing these carbs up and doing everything, you want to make sure you undo one side of the linkage. That way the adjustments you're making here aren't affecting over here. Lesson learned, just because the issue's on one side doesn't mean that it's the other side causing the problem. That's going to be it for this Mileage Unknown. Stay tuned for more car shenanigans.